Good evening, everyone, and welcome to my presentation, Is Pluto a Planet? I'll let you decide. Narrated by myself, Colin Miller. And before I get started, I just want to say first there will be no more transitions. I thought I'd start off with a little curtain opening, but I'll just get to the facts from here on out. But like I said, before I get started as well, I just wanted to say that my main goal of this presentation is not to sway you guys left or right, or whether or not Pluto is a planet or not, but just to give you the facts and the information that I have attained and let you make a decision for yourself. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and get started. To begin, I just want to give a little bit of background information on the discovery of Pluto. So in 1894, Percival Lowell built an observatory in Arizona with the goal to find life on Mars. Clyde Tombaugh came along and took over for Lowell with a new mission to identify Planet X that was part of the work left behind by Lowell. So, in short, Lowell was looking for life on Mars, but then found an object moving across the sky and unfortunately passed away before finding anything. But Clyde came along and eventually found Planet X, which was later given the name Pluto by an 11-year-old schoolgirl who had recently done some reading and some classwork on the Roman gods, and Pluto is the name of the god of the underworld. So that was kind of cool how that came about. But below here, a picture of Percival Lowell, just to give you guys an idea of what he looked like. Clyde Tombaugh was born and raised in Strader, Illinois, the oldest of 6 children, never had a college degree, in fact, which was pretty incredible for his discovery, and did not like the limelight or the fame that came with the discovery of Pluto. And I think the most interesting fact about Clyde was that all the telescopes he used were made by hand, and all the materials he had were from the farm that he was raised on. So just to give you an idea, his telescope, he had a few of them, but one of them had a lawnmower as a base, another one had part of a silo involved in it, and then there was another one that actually had a Coke can to cover up his eyeglass piece so it wouldn't get scratched or faded. Just kind of give you a couple materials that were used to make his telescope. The basics of Pluto. Pluto was established as a planet in 1930, making it the 9th planet in our solar system. Pluto has always been a fan favorite of people, including myself, and to give you a little bit more on that, I'm not entirely sure why. For me, I think it was because Pluto was the most recent planet discovered, and that it was, the oddball out in a sense, and maybe the underdog, if you want to say, in terms of size, mass, and that such. So I think that's why I kind of got attached to it. But anyway, Pluto is round, unlike most asteroids that are regular objects, which is another reason why it got some attention. And then Pluto is tremendously smaller than the other planets, and is even smaller than some moons. What else do we know about Pluto? So what we know is that Pluto orbits the Sun once every 248 years, and its orbit is much more elliptical than the other planets. Pluto's orbit is so elliptical that it overlaps the orbit of Neptune, but fortunately they will never hit or ever come close to knocking into one another. Pluto is much different from the terrestrial and Jovian planets in size, mass, as well as density. Pluto is made up of ice and rock, which is similar to the material that comets are made up of. Pluto is extremely cold, with an average temperature of negative 388 degrees Fahrenheit. With all this talk about Pluto and how it came about and all that good stuff, you're probably wondering, what is a planet? The original definition of a planet came from the ancient Greeks who believed that the Earth was stationary at the center of the universe while objects in the sky revolved around it. Now, while this may seem a little funny or a little weird, you have to give it to the Greeks. They really only had their eyes to observe the sky. There wasn't a telescope or any high technology, megapixel cameras or anything you could view the universe with. It was really only their eyes. So what they discovered was pretty incredible. But after the discovery of the Kuiper Belt in 1992, the integrity of Pluto was brought into question. In 2006, the International Astronomical Union voted on a new definition of planet that led to Pluto being ousted from planethood. And with this new vote, there was also a new criteria that needed to be followed to make it planet. So the three parts of that criteria were as follows. 1, it is in orbit around the Sun, which is something that Pluto is. 2, it has sufficient mass to assume a nearly round shape, and certainly Pluto is round, given its shape. But 3, it has cleared the neighborhood around its orbit. And when I say cleared the neighborhood, what I'm saying is that Pluto has ousted and knocked out and taken care of the other objects and materials that are around it. Either it's something that you either conform or you leave type of deal, where the surrounding areas, the surrounding neighborhood of Pluto is very crowded. And so that was something that kind of scientists were a bit skeptical about, and certainly not something that Pluto does given its very small size. Not to mention, Pluto is not one of a kind. So in the Kuiper Belt there are thousands of other objects that are made of the same exact ice and rock that Pluto is made of, making it not very special. Scientists estimate that there are up to 100 other objects like Pluto in the Kuiper Belt that have yet to be discovered. Although Clyde would roll over in his grave, hearing that Pluto is no longer a planet, there is little that makes it like the other 8 planets that have already been discovered. And with this picture down below, I wanted to put Pluto on the outside with its Kuiper Belt, and then kind of shows its elliptical rotation or elliptical orbit around the Sun, but also how many other objects are in the Kuiper Belt from the outside looking in that kind of discredit the uniqueness of Pluto. But we'll continue on. It's important to note that there are 3 discoveries that help scientists to change Pluto's status from that of a planet. 1, the discovery of the Kuiper Belt for reasons that I have previously mentioned. 2, the discovery of seasonal atmosphere similar to comets, saying that there are thousands of comets out there. And 3, discovery of large Kuiper Belt objects. And like I stated before, there are other large Kuiper Belt objects that are out there, and it was really just a matter of time. And in 2006, Mike Brown found the first object that was bigger than Pluto. So doing the math, 2006 from 1930 makes it 76 years after the initial discovery of Pluto. The public opinion of Pluto. In 2006, Pluto was no longer a planet under the new definition. So thousands of people across the world were enraged by the new definition of planet, especially the people from the hometown of Clyde Tombaugh. And understandably so, if you think about it, say I use myself as an example. If I spent my whole life towards the discovery of a planet, all that effort, time, resources, everything I had, and then years later, I come to find out that all my hard work was discredited, by a vote, so to say, by a vote taken, I would certainly be upset, and I think the people from his hometown kind of felt the same way. So the people of Strader, Illinois, were certainly proud of what Clyde had accomplished in his discovery. Clyde is an inspiration to many people in the town, and people of Strader believe that Walt Disney actually named a dog after their hometown hero. Everyone's familiar with Pluto, the big yellow red dog, not Clifford, the big red dog, but Pluto, the big yellow dog with the big collar, featured in many Disney films. And also Pluto is said to not only be a piece of Illinois history, but also American history as well as world history. And there's even a stained glass window located in a church within the town that shows the life cycle of Clyde and everything that he accomplished during his time. So with all this said, I was getting into the good and in favor of Pluto here, and a big supporter is a guy by the name of Alan Stern, who's one of the world's leading experts on Pluto, and was one of numerous scientists who signed a petition to not honor, and make that clear, to not honor the new definition. Stern is the principal investigator of the New Horizons mission to Pluto, and I'll get into that a little bit more, but real quick, the New Horizons mission was a mission to go observe Pluto. That would actually take 9.5 years to get there. So the New Horizon mission was started in 2006 and then finally reached Pluto in 2015, and I'll get more into their findings later in the presentation. The size of Pluto. Pluto's diameter is just under 1,500 miles, which would only stretch from California to Kansas, which is very short, in perspective to, you look at Jupiter, that is unbelievable in size, actually 62 times wider than Pluto. But anyway, 1/20th of the mass of Mercury is Pluto. Pluto would have been much bigger, taking all this into consideration, Pluto would have been much bigger than it is. There's a lack of material around it. Now, why there was a lack of material, scientists aren't really sure, but dwarf planets were said to be arrested during the mid-stage growth period. And when the word arrested, I kind of think of, when your growth gets stunted, when you're maybe in teenage years, if you lift too many weights, you kind of close up your growth plates. That's what I kind of think of when I hear the word arrested. Interesting comments from Stern came about during his interview with Dr. Neil Tyson. And him and Stern don't necessarily have the same opinions on Pluto, but Stern asked, I shouldn't say Stern, but Neil asked Stern whether or not, if it matters if a planet had to clear the neighborhood around its orbit. He came back with, that's all about location, and location is for realtors and not scientists. And I thought that was an interesting point. I think what Stern says later about his analogy of the planets is even more interesting, but I'll get to that. And so Stern sees the solar system as 4 terrestrial planets, including Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars, 4 Jovian planets, including Neptune, Jupiter, Saturn, and Uranus, and a cluster of dwarf planets in our solar system that are typically rocky and icy, many which have atmospheres and moons. Stern uses the analogy of a chihuahua that I was referring to earlier when he's referencing to size of the planets. The small size of a dog does not exclude it from the canine species because it has all the characteristics of a dog, just like a small planet should not be excluded from planethood. So if you think about that for a minute, I think that's rather interesting what Stern brings about here, and it's something to consider. The New Horizons spacecraft. So I mentioned before a little bit about the spacecraft, but again, it was launched in space in January 2006, and after 9.5 years of travel, the spacecraft reached Pluto in July 2015, and it was the first ever to visit Pluto. So down below on the right is a little picture of it. Before New Horizons spacecraft, Pluto was known to be less massive than any of the other terrestrial planets. Pluto has a comet-like composition of ice and rock, and Pluto was a member of the Kuiper Belt, which is stuff that we knew, as well as Pluto is sometimes nearer to the Sun than Neptune given its elliptical orbit. After New Horizons mission, Pluto has smooth plains of nitrogen ice. Pluto has tall mountains built of water ice. Pluto has 5 moons, the largest of which called Charon. Pluto also has an atmosphere of nitrogen, methane, and carbon monoxide. It is important to note that the features of relating to surface geology were learned from the New Horizons mission. And after 2015, the mission, more than 1,200 icy objects have been directly observed in the Kuiper Belt, allowing scientists to infer that the region contains over roughly 100,000 objects, which is rather incredible. What is still not proven about Pluto? 2 things, among some others, but one, Pluto has active volcanoes or not is still up for debate, and that Pluto has a surface or subsurface ocean of liquid water. 2 things that have still not to be proven. So, with all this being said, it really depends on who you ask. Some astronomers regard Pluto as a Kuiper Belt object, some call it a planet, others think of it as both. However, these discrepancies arise because a consensus has yet to emerge on the scientific definition of a planet. But, no matter what side you take, like I said at the beginning of the presentation, or what you consider Pluto to be, it is important to recognize that the countless amount of time, effort, and research that was put into the discovery of the solar system as we know it today should not be discredited by any means, because it was really tremendous how everything came together and came about, and all the knowledge that I just gave you in this presentation is really incredible. So no matter what side you take, I want to thank you for listening to my presentation, and I hope you were able to get a lot out of it. So, all the best.